Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Remember to hit that subscribe button. After the excitement of seeing the trailer for Dune Part 2 and officially making that my most anticipated film of the entire year, I got the itch to rewatch the first Dune for the first time since I initially saw it in theaters about 2 years ago now. So let's talk about how it actually holds up on a rewatch. So it's important, I think, to talk about my initial thoughts on Dune. Firstly, I have not read the book and I haven't seen David Lynch's adaptation, and I will not be doing either until Denis Villeneuve's saga is complete. I don't want to know about anything that's going to happen until we get to see those adaptations. I think the first time I watched it, I really enjoyed it. On my Letterboxd account, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, noting that the world building is really excellent, but I thought it was a little bit too slow paced at times, and some of the dialogue was just a little bit too much and not enough visual storytelling. Other than that, they were really my only flaws. The rest of the film I thought was absolutely incredible. Villeneuve is the master of sci-fi in my opinion, and he created a film that was said to be unadaptable and did an excellent job. Now, behind some of that criticism went with being exposed to this world for the very first time. I watched this on the biggest screen that I could possibly find, and I have to say the scope, sound, and production value kind of overwhelmed me a little, making it difficult at times for me to comprehend some of the lore and world building. And the film really asks you to think and doesn't really hold your hand too much. It's not like a Marvel movie or Star Wars where it is just pure entertainment and you can kind of sit back, relax, and enjoy what it presents. Dune was considered to be boring by some audiences because it does the complete opposite of that. It builds this elaborate world with rich characters, and some of it can be hard to keep up with when you're taking in the sights of Arrakis for the first time. Now, watching Dune felt very reminiscent of watching Blade Runner 2049, another Denis Villeneuve sci-fi. Having not been familiar with that world until seeing 2049 in theaters, the experience kind of overwhelmed me. I recently rewatched that film quite a few months ago now, and I let the story sink in a lot more. And now I think Blade Runner 2049 is easily a top 5 sci-fi film ever. I say all that because after recently watching the 4K copy of Dune for the first time since I saw the film in theaters, I had a very similar experience. The story kind of washed over me a lot more. The world became a lot more digestible and it felt like a completely different experience. And seeing it again, I really think that this is truly a masterful sci-fi film that is also one of the best in the genre. It always baffles me that WB was questioning whether to release a sequel at one point. I know the game is to make money, but man, let's say that it doesn't quite make enough money and WB does not approve the sequel. I think that would have been one of the biggest tragedies in the history of cinema. Now, even after this second watch, I wouldn't quite call it my favorite movie of 2021. After the first watch, I had it at number 9 on my list for the entire year, and after the rewatch, it is now at number 4. As I have mentioned in previous videos, out of all of the Best Picture nominees, that was the most deserving to win in that year. I was very careful about that wording because my top 3 favorite films of the year were not nominated for a single Oscar. They were Annette at number 3, The Green Knight at number 2, and The French Dispatch at number 1. I know all 3 of those films are quite divisive, and I'm not going to go into why I love those movies. But no, if you don't like those movies, that's perfectly fine, but nothing's going to change my opinion of those movies. But going back to my original point, out of the Best Picture nominees, Dune was my favorite movie, and its combination of innovative blockbuster filmmaking and creating a rich world adapted from a very difficult novel to adapt, I think that made it very deserving. Now, when I bring this up, I have had comments mentioning the Lord of the Rings trilogy as an example, and I totally get your point, and I can agree with it. I knew Dune was not going to win Best Picture. I knew at the time it was a 2-horse race between The Power of the Dog and Coda, but to me, Dune just had such a larger impact than both of those movies probably combined. Now, the Lord of the Rings example, for those of you who don't know, is if you are familiar with Oscars history, only The Return of the King took home Best Picture in one of the greatest sweeps in Oscars history. However, The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers did quite well in tech categories, but did not win the big prize. The two films that won over both those films were A Beautiful Mind and Chicago, which to me seem to be some of the more forgettable Best Picture winners in Oscars history. We look back on that, and I think we can all agree that arguably the greatest trilogy of all time in The Lord of the Rings should have swept in each of those years, because it is truly something that could never be replicated ever again. That was actually something that held me back when I initially saw Dune. A lot of people were comparing this to The Lord of the Rings and being the next big saga that manages to capture that feeling of Lord of the Rings. Having those expectations in your mind before seeing a film is instantly a disadvantage, because that is incredibly difficult to live up to. Dune is probably not as good as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but they should never be compared because they're in completely different genres and have such different methods of storytelling. Sure, The Fellowship of the Ring and Dune Part 1 end in a very similar fashion, but that's really about it. Dune is a high concept sci-fi, while The Lord of the Rings is based in a more medieval fashion. Dune doesn't really have a direct comparison in my eyes. Like The Lord of the Rings, it lives in its own space and it's truly worthy of being some of the best films in the genre it's in. Dune to me is now a masterpiece with some of the best visual effects, production design, costume design, makeup, and cinematography you will ever see. Let's also get into that incredible score from Hans Zimmer. It just captures the world of Dune and makes it feel like a massive epic just from the sound of that score. The direction from Villeneuve, as per usual, is phenomenal. He has a passion for this story and he managed to realize that, and his snub for an Oscar nomination for Best Director was a damn crime. The performances are excellent. Timothée Chalamet in the lead was a perfect casting choice. I didn't really have any doubt that he wouldn't perform under the big lights of this massive blockbuster film. I don't think he has ever given a weak performance, and he is particularly strong here. The rest of the ensemble are also brilliant. I love Oscar Isaac. Rebecca Ferguson has some really great moments, and surprisingly, Jason Momoa probably gives his best performance since he was in Game of Thrones. The Fremen, to me, were also some of the most fascinating characters in this film, and the actors that play them were great casting choices. I cannot wait to see more of Javier Bardem and Zendaya. How could I have gone this long without mentioning the sandworms once? Villeneuve wants to really illustrate how strong and powerful these creatures are. Each time these characters are moving in the desert on Arrakis, you feel a sense of tension because the sandworms could just instantly appear and kill them extremely easily. You see them dive in the sand and they make it look like water. They are incredibly strong. The sequence where we are first introduced to them is a testament to Villeneuve's direction, as you truly get an understanding of how strong they are. Then there is obviously the shot where Paul Atreides comes face to face with one, and once again you see how massive they are. Then there is the underlying element of the film's runtime, which are these dream sequences that were a lot more interesting to me on a rewatch after seeing the trailer for the second part, because they are providing a teaser for what's to come next. But these moments are also very misleading at times. For example, Paul has a vision of losing the final fight in this first movie, but he wins easily, showing that he might be Shai Hulud to the Fremen, who will be the one to liberate them from the Emperor and the Harkonnens. This sequence makes you question the validity to many of these dreams, and it will be interesting to see Dune Part 2 as to finding out what may be misleading and what won't be. Overall, on a revisit, Dune showed me fully that it is truly one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time. It was a lot better on a rewatch, which was crazy because I did love this the first time. I just loved it a whole lot more this time. I'm really excited for the second part and to see where that story is going to go. I said initially I thought Dune was a 4.5 out of 5, but after seeing it a second time, I can truly appreciate the world building and the dialogue. It all just came together a little better for me, And like Blade Runner 2049, it is now a 5 out of 5, and once again shows that Denis Villeneuve is one of the greatest sci-fi filmmakers of all time. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sure some of my thoughts were a little muddled here, but you get the point. Dune is awesome. If you haven't seen it, please go and watch it. And if you weren't so keen on it the first time, try it a second time, because it is a film that you might gain a newfound appreciation for. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.